I'm really excited about inFamous because as a player, I am one of those people who wants to be able to just go everywhere.
And when we say that it's an open world game, we mean that in 3 dimensions.
We have this ability to climb over everything. It's kind of infectious.
PS3 is really the only place we could have made this.
PlayStation 3 is kind of like a very deep well, and I have never seen the bottom of it yet, performance-wise. So it's a pleasure to have that freedom, to create a game where you're really limited by your imagination and the hardware is not this roadblock that it used to be.
It's a large, interactive streaming world with tons of characters, tons of content, and we certainly take good advantage of the hard disk that's there to be shuttling all this information in. But perhaps the most important aspect of it for us is the cell processor. It's this mind-boggling number of calculations that are going into how to get everybody's feet and body lean in the correct place. And on top of that, it's doing visibility, it's doing a whole bunch of our skinning and animation code, it's doing particle systems. And all of this stuff has been crafted and created to run specifically on the cell processors.
There are layers and layers of animations. It's something that the PlayStation 3 and our engine actually allows us to really take advantage of, is just layering those and not having to worry about the overhead associated with that. Allows us to do some very creative things and some very expressive things.
We really needed to have the power of the PS3 there. All the bandwidth we get out of the RSX graphics chip, the capacity, the Blu-ray.
When we're making this game for the PS3, we're constantly amazed by how much the technology allows us to add a lot more. It's cool.
From the very beginning of the game, we knew we wanted a system that allowed Cole to just kind of master the city, to climb all over it. It's a jungle gym for Cole.
If it looks like you should be able to get there, you can get there. And we really made it so that you have this feeling of playing a very live, kind of agile, panther-like character who really just is capable of going everywhere.
Our goal was to let you grab and climb on anything you saw, but in a real city, there are lots of things you can grab. We have a debug mode in the game where you can turn on little displays to show you everything that Cole might grab, and it's amazing.
As he moves along the rooftops, there's a sort of rhythm to his actions, and as a player, you feel it. You zip along, you jump, you repulse gravity a little bit, you grab onto a bit of a building, climb up, see an enemy, blast him off the rooftop, and keep going. And it's really addictive.
Cole was an urban explorer before the blast, so he already had some physical abilities to climb, and he was obviously brave enough to do it. But now that he's electrically powered, he's even more able to take advantage of that. It kind of amps him up even more.
We had to work really, really hard on figuring out what the player really intended when they're jumping through the air. Are they actually trying to grab that ledge, or are they trying to grab the ledge next to that? We call it reading the player's mind through his thumbs. We've been pretty successful with it, and it makes the game really fun to play because it doesn't feel like you're using the controller. If we do our job right, then the controller disappears. You don't think about it at all. You just do what you want to do, and it happens.
If you had control of electricity, what would you do?
One of the reasons we decided to make Cole an electrically based superhero is that electricity is all around you when you're in the city. You see power lines everywhere. You see light poles. You see, junction boxes on the wall. So wherever Cole goes, he's kind of really in his milieu.
And our character draws electricity out of the power grid, and it fuels his powers. And of course, because we chose electricity, we could go really deep on that one subject. We've modeled all the metal in the world to conduct electricity, to jump between objects and zap people, zap enemies.
We knew we really wanted him to be able to do these when hanging off the side of a pole, when standing on a bar, balancing on a bar, even when hanging from the edge of a ledge. And so we really put a premium on making sure that he could do all those things and he could fluidly move from jumping and landing to immediately shooting.
What we chose to do was pick the power for the hero around what would be really fun in a video game context, and then build the world and the guy's personality and everything around that one choice. Because we're making a superhero game, or a guy with superpowers, it really seemed like we need to give you this opportunity to be heroic, to make choices that were sort of for the greater good, at the expense of maybe something you might want. And for you to make a choice that feels heroic, you need to be given the option to be a total jerk, to be selfish. Otherwise, there is no choice.
The more you use your powers for good things, you'll find that your powers start offering you opportunities to maybe be more precise with your attacks. On the flip side, the more evil you are, the more grand and destructive your powers will become kind of on a course way. And that's kind of our desire to really give the player this experience of, hey, it's the path I'm choosing that matters.
The people in Empire City, the people that you're helping, they'll remember if you're a jerk. They'll remember if you're a nice person. And that'll affect how you get to play the game in the future.
If they like you, they actually might lend a hand with some of the things you need to do. If they don't like you, well, you'll find some spontaneous mobs forming and attacking you with rocks. And the best part is that you can just shoot them with your electrical superpower and they go flying across the world.
It's a believable character in believable human situations, except for that you've got this kick-ass supernatural power, and you get to choose how to use it. Empire City certainly has a lot of character.
The DNA of superheroes takes place in major metropolitan cities, and so we knew all along we were going to do our version of Gotham, Empire City.
Real cities are dirty, they're grimy, they've got clutter, they've got garbage in every corner.
We started talking about the city breathing, the city groaning, the buildings crumbling off in the distance as music. Like, what would that sound like?
Since the blast, the place has become this sort of wonderland of destruction where a lot of masonry got thrown, higgly-piggly in the blast. Cars and buses smashed into the sides of buildings. It feels like this hurricane is torn through. It's bleeding. The city itself is broken.
It's foul. We wanted the city to feel like there was despair around. So if you see people walking down the street, they don't look very happy because they aren't. And it really gives the city a feeling of life.
The city's actually reactive to who you are in the world. If you choose to be a nice guy and win the love of the people,
I know you can heal him.
you'll actually see the city get cleaner and kind of repair itself a little bit. And that's pretty crazy. We wanted to make the thing have a character and sort of look back at you for what you did, to respond, and not just be this inert mass.
The architecture is clearly influenced by two big things. The first was a desire to have it feel like a grounded, largely Western city. That's where superhero stories exist. At the same time, we looked at cities, international cities that had really great opportunities for climbing and jungle gymming across. It's kind of a mishmash, very intentionally, of things to try and show age of a city and like it's been lived in.
Not only are they controlling the character, but they're controlling a character in a world where they can do anything they want to. They can literally wander the city aimlessly for hours if they choose, and the music needs to account for all of that.
It's been really important for us to approach the music like sound design to really capture the spirit, the voice of Empire City. Even though we're in a big urban environment, we want the percussion and the instrumentation to be very tribal, very savage.
One of the first things in this game that I was also approached about, which I've never seen in any other game and I've never had to do either, was to score things in two different ways depending on where you are in the game or how you're doing. You can choose to be a hero or an anti-hero, and the music needs to echo that.
That was fantastic, Mark.
There's an edgy, punchy, kind of dark and very thoughtful component to the music. The ambient music is meant to be bleeding out of this broken city, this city that's sort of been bombed out and is hurting. And so much of the music is really meant to meld with the sound design and almost become indistinguishable from it.
Initially, when we were hearing that the city was kind of alive, and how we would do that musically and sound design to blend those two worlds, I had two ideas in mind. The first one was to go out and do some street recording. The second part was to do a custom sampling session.
You want it to be orchestral, but you don't want it to be John Williams. You want it to have, a little bit more of an urban quality to it. We were sort of driven by kind of an industrial feel, a lot of percussion.
The way that we address that is by using a lot of instruments that are very rustic and urban, like trash cans and metal pipes and cardboard boxes, and just beating on all kinds of different things in different ways.
And then at the same time, we've taken a lot of really conventional instruments and tried to play them and use them and frankly, abuse them in really unconventional ways.
Not to mention that our artist, Amon Tobin, manipulates sounds and carries them into a completely different space, so that even the combat music has this effect of sounding like the city is kind of throwing its head back and roaring.
The thing that's really different about inFamous is the level of density we have in the city. It makes it a much more enjoyable environment to play in.
We want the whole thing to be an immersive experience.
You experience the city more than just hear it or feel it or play it. It's the combined efforts that really make inFamous something special in terms of the whole package.
The game opens with this really awful, devastating explosion. It knocks down 6 square blocks of Empire City.
Hurts and kills, thousands of people.
But somehow you survive. You have these crazy electrical powers. So one of the things that we really find fun about superhero stories is the process of understanding where these powers came from and why they're there. In inFamous, this isn't a question that gets answered all for you at the beginning of the game.
The phrase that we always talked about was zero to hero. You want to be this guy who's incredibly low status at the beginning of the game, and you want to be either famous or infamous at the end. You become this superhuman person. Do you use that for good or for evil?
The sorts of decisions you make like that, minute to minute, affect how the whole city reacts to you.
There's a lot of depth in the behaviors of both the enemies and also the non-player characters, just the citizens.
I've been robbed!
The sort of systemic complexity of the game is something that allows the player to have unexpected, exciting things happen.
Feds dropped some more medical supplies, but they landed on that roof. Could you knock them down?
There's this enormous world of side missions and quests that you can do in inFamous, which is on the order of 3 times as many things as the primary path has.
You're not in just one big long tunnel going from the beginning of the mission to the end of the mission every time. You're in a city and you can go wherever you want, whenever you want.
The cutscenes really were an attempt to tell stories that feel genuine in a graphic novel sense. They don't feel like we're exploiting the genre. They feel more like we're part of that genre. Really beautiful, detailed graphic art, but all kind of taken into a dimension where it can be animated and rendered and using effects to kind of tell our stories, at the same time really having it feel fresh and something people hadn't seen a lot of.
At first, it's just the standard disaster film where you happen to have superpowers. And as you get more into it, you understand that everything is not as it seems, and that the people you know aren't necessarily who you think they are.
It's like peeling an onion. You figure out one thing, you think you understand it, and then you find out that, well, you kind of understood it, but there's something deeper going on.
We've hidden all kinds of little narrative hiccups, which I'm sure people are never going to see. The casual player is never going to understand the depth of everything going on in Empire City. However, if you're a really dedicated player, if you're somebody that really wants to know every last bit of what's happening, it's there for you. You just have to decide that you want to explore this huge 3-dimensional sculpture that is Empire City. And you can just go right down the rabbit hole.
We are asking a critical thing of our players and our viewers, which is to believe that someone could get electrically superpowered. And that's kind of the gateway to the whole game.
Electricity is great because it's kind of malleable in what you can do with it. I mean, you can do the obvious, which is shoot somebody in the face with a lightning bolt, which is, I know, for me, kind of a core fantasy.
He starts out with 2 or 3 superpowers he can do, and throughout the game we unlock more and more of them.
He starts off with the ability to throw electricity from his hands, and he has the ability to throw out electromagnetic pulse waves.
It's an electric wave that's traveling out in front of him. Everything from that to the really crazy stuff you might expect with lightning, which is calling down a massive thunderstrike. They're more conventional things like grenades and rockets, but we've framed them in a way that it is Cole using and extending his powers.
Over the course of the game, you end up getting another 15 or 16 powers, and those powers, in addition to the ones you start off with, are all upgradable, at least 3 ways, and most of them actually end up having good and bad upgrades you can do depending on how you're playing the game. If you multiply it all out, I think you got over 80 powers that you end up with.
Cole is very dependent on electricity, and while it's a source of his strength, there are also a lot of weaknesses associated with that.
I'm so totally grateful. You're a lifesaver.
One of his powers is that he can kind of resuscitate people who are injured, or on the other hand, he can drain the electricity from people in the game and use that to fuel his own superpowers. Anytime that there's an interesting resource that the character wants that inherently hurts someone else, you're faced with this choice of, I want this thing, am I willing to hurt this person to get it?
So in a lot of ways, he's kind of challenged by this gift. This is a game that delivers on something I've thought about all the time, which is, if I had superpowers, what would I do with them? You know, if I could turn invisible, would I go on a stealth mission for the FBI, or would I sneak into the girls' locker room? You know, these are the kind of challenges that would be presented to you as a real-life person when given superpowers.
We really wanted to kind of take you through that journey that you read about in graphic novels and you see on superhero movies. We wanted you to play that. It's remarkable. These guys have created between 20 and 30 minutes of animated movies in a remarkably short period of time. Clearly there's voiceover talent that's contributing to this, and there's music and scoring that's going to happen after it. But the principal production of that at Sucker Punch has been 4 guys really almost by themselves for, you know, a little over a year, and it's been a remarkable achievement for those guys.
Thank you.